Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to AITAREYA Institute. Today is 14th of July, and I, Manvi Srivastav, will cover today's current affairs with you. So let us begin. So the first news is about India-New Zealand bilateral relations. So the Prime Minister of India has visited the country of New Zealand, and this is the first by any Indian Prime Minister in 40 years. That is why it becomes all the more important. Elevated bilateral ties have been turned into strategic partnerships. The bilateral ties have been turned into strategic partnership. This is something that you have to remember. So let me highlight it. Now we have built a strategic partnership with the New Zealand. So both countries have also adopted the India-New Zealand Strategic Partnership Roadmap to 2030 to guide cooperation across climate and people-to-people relations. Two different things, climate and the people-to-people relations. Oh my God, this is not visible here. So let me just quickly do this. I hope this is visible. Okay. These are the two fields in which they have started their strategic partnership roadmap to 2030. Let us take a further look about the India-New Zealand bilateral relations. So these relations constitute a growing multi-dimensional partnership. That is, it consists of many different dimensions. And this is what are these different dimensions? First is democratic value, then commonwealth ties, then strong people-to-people connection, then economic complementarities, and with that common interest in a free, open, and rule-based Indo-Pacific. We often see this being mentioned everywhere. Free, open, and rule-based Indo-Pacific. Okay, this. So these are the different dimensions in which we are trying to grow a partnership with New Zealand as the nation of India. Let us proceed. What are the key outcomes of this recent India-New Zealand summit? The first one is strategic partnership and roadmap to 2030. That is India and New Zealand. They have elevated the bilateral tie into a strategic partnership, and they have also adopted the roadmap to 2030 to guide cooperation across strategic sectors. The two things we have to understand. First is that the bilateral ties have been elevated now and turned to strategic partnership. And the second one is that they have adopted a roadmap to 2030 for cooperation across different strategic sectors. Now let's talk about political and diplomatic engagement. So both the countries have established a regular foreign minister dialogue. Their foreign ministers will have dialogues regularly. Annual senior officers meeting, that is their senior officers will meet annually, and stronger parliamentary exchanges to institutionalize this bilateral engagement. Stronger parliamentary exchanges, and all of these together, the foreign ministers dialogue, the senior officials meeting, and these parliamentary exchanges, this will institutionalize this bilateral engagement. Next, we move to defense and maritime security. So when we talk about defense and maritime security, this summit has strengthened this cooperation in defense through few different things. First is the maritime cooperation arrangement. Second is mutual logistics support arrangement. Third is hydrography cooperation. And then we have bilateral naval exercises and an annual maritime security dialogue. These are the different things that we're working on. One is the annual maritime security dialogue. Next is the maritime cooperation arrangement. Then we have mutual logistics support arrangement. Then we have hydrographic cooperation. And then we have bilateral naval exercises. And lastly, maritime security dialogue. These are the different methods to which the partnership and cooperation in defense and maritime security has been strengthened. Then we have counter-terrorism and law enforcement. So both sides together, India and New Zealand, have established a joint working group on counter-terrorism, and they have agreed for cooperation against different things like narcotics trafficking, like cyber crime, like financial crime, like human trafficking, and like organized crime. So this joint working group on counter-terrorism will focus on these things and cooperation between India and New Zealand, right? FTA and trade target. When we talk about FTA and trade target, we understand that both of these countries have have welcomed the conclusion of the India-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, and they have set a target of doubling bilateral trade to New Zealand dollars 7 billion by 2030. This is the target. The target becomes important. The bilateral trade target has been set to New Zealand dollars. How many New Zealand dollars? 7 billion. That is Indian rupees 35,000 crores by 2030. This is their target. Okay, this is target of bilateral trade. Also, we talk about agriculture, horticulture, and dairying. These are also outcomes. So they have developed an agriculture productivity partnership launched for which kiwi fruit, New Zealand, kiwi, kiwi fruit, apples, honey. These are famous things from New Zealand. Alongside cooperation in animal husbandry, dairying, food safety, and value chains. Value chains become important. When you talk about these few years, value chains have become really important focal point. Then we talk about tourism, connectivity, and maritime mobility. So a tourism agreement has been signed. Tourism arrangement, sorry, has been signed, and it will have direct non-stop flights, and also the cooperation will be increased for the recognition of seafarer competency certificates for the certifications and for non-stop direct flights. Then we talk about sports, culture, and people-to-people ties. A joint action plan on sport has been developed. A joint action plan on sport has been adopted, and cultural cooperation and maritime heritage ties were also strengthened through institutional arrangements. Then we talk about education, technology, climate, and disaster resilience. Both the sides have expanded their cooperation in different sectors like education, like student mobility, like research, like emerging technologies, like clean energy, like disaster management, and like all these things, also including biofuels. So there's a global biofuel alliance which New Zealand has now joined. Okay, let us talk more about this. So global biofuel alliance actually is a different kind of work plan. Okay, it was launched to accelerate the global adoption of these biofuels during the India's G20 presidency in October 2023. At that time, India was presiding the G20 meetings, and this global biofuel alliance was launched. Why was it launched? To accelerate the adoption of biofuels globally, and in that. Different countries are included. India is also a part of it, of course. The goal is to actually enhance the global biofuel trade for a more sustainable future. And recently, New Zealand has joined it. Okay, this is the news. And also, when we talk about Indo-Pacific and multilateral cooperation, we have to talk about Indo-Pacific and multilateral cooperation, because when any country in the global south joins hands, they do focus on Indo-Pacific and this multilateral cooperation. So both countries have reaffirmed their support for a free and open Indo-Pacific, UN clause, and ASEAN centrality, while New Zealand has backed India's permanent UNSC membership and entry into Nuclear Suppliers Group, that is NSG. Then let's talk about the opportunities. Let us talk about opportunities for India in bilateral relations. What are opportunities that we are looking at? First is expanding the Indo-Pacific strategic reach. That is, closer maritime and defense ties with New Zealand will help us extend India's footprint in the global south, and this will complement the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative and the engagement with Pacific Island countries. Also, diversifying trade and export markets. This free trade agreement, it can open opportunities for Indian pharmaceuticals, textiles, engineering goods, digital services, skilled professionals, and what will it reduce? Our dependence on the traditional export markets. Then we talk about modernizing Indian agriculture. New Zealand is an expert in horticulture, food safety, post-harvest technology, and value chain management, and India can certainly learn from them. So this can actually help raise the Indian farm productivity, especially apple, kiwi, and honey. Then we talk about strengthening education and skill mobility. How do we do that? Deeper institutional partnerships, expanding opportunities for Indian students, researchers, and professionals. Joint research can also advance the innovation in agriculture, climate, emerging technologies. These are just few things that we are gaining from New Zealand. Then a gateway to Pacific Island countries. Very important. This is the most important strategic point. So New Zealand has deep historical and strategic connections with Pacific Island nations, and this can complement India's Act East policy and Forum for Indo-Pacific Island Cooperation, that is FIPIC, and expanding India's diplomatic and developmental presence in Oceania. What is this Forum for Indo-Pacific Islands? What is this forum? Okay, let me tell you. So the Pacific Island countries have three major group of islands, that is Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia. Melanesia lower, Micronesia upper, and Polynesia the biggest part. So these are total 14 countries scattered in the Southwest Pacific Ocean, and they include the Cook Island, Fiji, Kiribati, Marshall Island, Micronesia, Nauru, Samoa, Solomon Island, Palau, uh, and Tonga, Tuvalu, uh, Vanuatu also. There are a few more countries. So there are 14 countries, and these are strategically located completely at the significant trade routes of the small island nations, and they have very small populations. They have the importance is that their exclusive economic zone is very rich in resources, and hence their importance is slowly rising. because of the Indo-Pacific shifting of the focal point. And India has engaged with them for centuries. In the 19th century, Indian workers migrated there as plantation laborers and indentured plantation laborers, and they started working there, especially in Fiji. And after the independence, this region was not that important in the foreign policy. However, foreign policy was redesigned, and now they have gained some importance because, especially because of their location and because of their resources. And India's own Act East policy has focused on that. So, the Forum of India Pacific Island Cooperation started in Fiji in 2014 when Indian PM visited in Fiji, and that includes all the 14 Pacific Island countries. And so this becomes very important for India and very important both for New Zealand. Okay, now what are a few challenges? What are a few challenges associated with India-New Zealand relations? First of all, this limited bilateral trade base. What do we mean by that? That the engagement is growing, but the bilateral trade still is very modest, very slow. Compared to the trade with Australia, Japan, and major Asian countries that they trade with India, compared to that, New Zealand and India trade is very less. So this limits the commercial gains. Second, agricultural and dairy sensitivities. What do we mean by that? That when we start actually competing with New Zealand's dairy and agriculture exports, the Indian small and marginal farmers, they get affected, and they require the market access, and they require stronger safeguards, and the standards are very high. And in India, the farmers will have a hard time cooperating with that. Then let's talk about geographical distance and connectivity gaps. Okay, so there's no direct air and maritime connectivity between India and New Zealand. So this will raise the transportation cost. This will restrict the tourism, business travel, efficient movement of goods from one part to another. So the trade becomes a little difficult. So connectivity should be something that we should be focused on. Then there are differences in strategic priorities. So both support rule-based Indo-Pacific New Zealand rule-based system, but the fact that India has a different kind of geopolitical and military issue does not really help. Then implementation and institutional capacity. So expanding the number of agreements, dialogue, and cooperation mechanisms, this will have limited results. It is clearly written. Unless it is backed by clear timelines, there should be deadlines, timelines, dedicated financing, institutional ownership, regular monitoring, and all of these things to make sure these agreements on all these dialogues and cooperation mechanisms are working. What about the way forward? First is ensure time-bound roadmap implementation, as we talked about. No matter how many agreements you have, if you do not make it act timely, it will not help. That is why we have this roadmap to 2030 to convert these commitments into actual concrete outcomes. Then, what? Protect sensitive sectors by implementing the FTAs. So while you're implementing the free trade agreement, some sensitive sectors should be safeguarded. Like what? Like textiles, engineering, services, pharmaceuticals. So maximum export opportunities should be explored for that, but vulnerable agriculture sectors should be safeguarded. And that is how we should calibrate this our policy, ACTIS policy, and the cooperation with various countries, especially like New Zealand. Then operationalize maritime cooperation. So regular naval exercises, maritime information sharing, logistics cooperation, coordinated capacity building, all of these together should translate this new maritime agreement into some tangible Indo-Pacific security outcome that cannot be just seen on paper but actual in real life. Then, last but not the least, build innovation and knowledge corridors. Joint research funds, which we talked about, university partnerships, innovation hubs, all of these should focus on agri-tech, biotechnology, climate resilient agriculture, clean energy, artificial intelligence, and disaster resilience. So to conclude, this elevation of bilateral relationship into the strategic partnership, which is much more important than bilateral relationship, this marks a transformation from limited engagement to a broad-based strategic cooperation. And then we have developed this roadmap to 2030. Then there's this free trade agreement. Also, we have new defense and maritime architecture. All of these will provide a foundation for deeper relationships between India and New Zealand. And this effective implementation of this in a time-bound manner can transform the entire partnership into a very important pillar of India's wider Indo-Pacific and Pacific outreach, especially all the four Pacific nations that we talked about. That would be it for this news. Let us proceed to the next one. And the next news is about helium as a strategic resource. Let us understand about helium as a strategic resource. So this one is an important news about helium. Now, helium is a very important resource. It is A finite non-renewable. What do you mean by a finite non-renewable? Finite means it is limited in the world. It is only a limited amount. It is not beyond that. And non-renewable, that it cannot be renewed again and again. That you cannot have new helium once this is exhausted. So helium is a finite non-renewable. And there are tensions going on in the West Asian countries. Okay, West Asian countries have tension. That Middle East has tension, and Qatar has a lot of helium facilities and it exports to the world. But because of the tensions, there are attacks on the Qatar's helium facilities, and hence China has banned its helium exports because it wants to save the domestic helium for itself. So let us read. China temporarily banned helium exports amid the West Asian tensions and attacks on Qatar's helium facilities, aiming to secure the domestic supplies as shipments through the Strait of Hormuz face disruption risk. So the shipments through the Strait of Hormuz are facing disruption risks, and that is why China wants to secure its own domestic helium uh, um, supplies, and it wants to use them domestically instead of exporting them. Now, helium has transitioned from a mundane commercial gas into a highly sought after strategic resource. Earlier, it was just a commercial gas, now, it is a highly sought after strategic resource. It serves as an irreplaceable foundation of frontier technologies, national security networks, and scientific research. It is a non renewable finite, as it is written, and can neither be artificially synthesized nor replaced in ultra low temperature environment. Okay, this cannot be replaced and this cannot be synthesized by humankind. Let us look at the physical and chemical properties of helium. Helium has the lowest boiling point of any element. The lowest boiling point is award goes to helium. It has the lowest boiling point, minus 269 degrees Celsius or 4.2 Kelvin at 1 atmosphere pressure. 1 atmosphere is the unit of pressure. This makes it the only substance that remains liquid near absolute zero. What is absolute zero? Absolute zero is 0 Kelvin. Okay. So there is no substance that remains liquid as absolute zero. Everything turns into solid because of the freezing point, but helium remains zero. Okay, even the freezing point is way below this. Even the boiling point is just slightly higher than this. Okay, 4.2 Kelvin is the boiling point. Below it, it remains liquid. Then we have thermal conductivity, high thermal conductivity. It can absorb and it can dissipate an intense heat faster than almost any other gas, and that makes it crucial for rapid precision cooling. So when something needs to be cooled rapidly and precisely, helium is put on it so that it can absorb all the heat from it and it can then dissipate it. So high thermal conductivity. Then extreme chemical inertness. What do we mean by chemical inertness? Chemical inertness means that it does not react with other chemicals, and all the noble gases are chemically inert. So, as a noble gas, helium is also a noble gas. Okay, as a noble gas, it does not participate in chemical reactions and it provides a perfectly stable environment for the volatile industrial manufacturing where we need the gases to remain inert and not react with each other while we're processing them. Then we have tiny atomic radius. So, they possess miniature light atoms, and helium can diffuse easily through microscopic gaps, and that's why engineers can track minute structural defects. Suppose engineers have built something and it has some kind of crack, some kind of leakage, and nobody is able to detect it. We use helium to detect it because helium can pass through these miniature microscopic gaps and help us detect that. Okay, and these are a few properties of helium. Let us study about how is helium formed. Helium is not manufactured. Helium occurs naturally. It cannot be manufactured. It cannot be synthesized artificially. It is a finite resource. It is limited in amount. Once it is exhausted, there's no going back. It is a finite resource generated deep within the Earth's crust over millions of years through the natural radioactive alpha decay of heavy elements like uranium and thorium. So when heavy elements like uranium and thorium, they have radioactive alpha decay, that is when helium is formed, and it is formed deep within the Earth's crust, and it has formed over millions of years, and now we're using it. This emitted alpha particle that captures the local electron and it transforms into a stable helium atom. So the alpha rays that are, or alpha particles that are emitted from these radioactive uranium and thorium elements, when the radioactivity occurs, these alpha particles capture local electrons and these transform into helium atoms. So helium is converted from heavy metals. Yes. Helium is formed because of the alpha particles. Yes. Helium is basically an alpha particle capturing an electron. Yes. Over epochs are what? Epochs means time periods, large time periods. Over epoch, this gas migrates upward. The gas formed deep within the earth, then it migrates upward then it is trapped inside the underground pockets alongside natural gas deposit. Where is it found? It is found under the Earth's crust alongside the natural gas deposits. It is commercially viable to extract only when the natural gas reservoir contains a minimum helium concentration of 3% by volume, using cryogenic fractional distillation to isolate the helium based on its distinct boiling point. What do we mean by that? So, from the natural gas reservoir, helium can be extracted alongside the natural gas, but it can only be extracted when helium is at least 3% by volume of that combination of gas. And then we use this cryogenic fractional distillation. This fractional distillation isolates different gases at different levels. Have you seen fractional distillation in your science class while you were kids? So during distillation, different gases are captured at different levels based on their liquid or melting point or boiling point. And hence, by this process, helium is, by cryogenic fractional distillation, isolated at a different level, and hence this is based on its boiling point. This process is called cryogenic fractional distillation. Okay, and the minimum concentration is 3% by volume. The occurrence is alongside natural gas deposits. Okay, and it is formed how alpha particles capture local electrons and form helium. These alpha particles are emitted by uranium and thorium. Okay, helium is not manufactured. This becomes very important. I'm pretty sure if they ask a question about helium, they will definitely ask if this is manufactured artificially or how do we manufacture helium. Okay, the criticality of helium is a strategic resource. The semiconductor lifeline. The frontier microchip fabrication process, the process of making microchips, this includes EUV, that is extreme ultraviolet lithography, plasma etching, atomic layer deposition. All of these processes completely depend on liquid helium for the heat management and water cooling and the wafer cooling. So in these processes of creating semiconductors, including the process of extreme ultraviolet lithography, plasma etching, and atomic layer deposition, helium is used to cool because excessive heat is generated. Then quantum computing architectures. How do they operate? To maintain the stability of these superconducting quantum processes, they are submerged in liquid helium environments near absolute zero temperature. And this maintains their stability. Then aerospace fuel tank pressurization. So ISRO, NASA, all of these space organizations, they use helium for what? A high pressure displacing agent. This displaces and this forces the liquid oxygen and hydrogen propellants into the engine of the rocket. So to force the combination of the fuel, that is liquid hydrogen and liquid oxygen, into the tank, into the rocket engine, helium is used as a high pressure displacing agent. Advanced medical imaging diagnostics. What do we mean by that? MRI machines use that. The hospital magnetic resonance imaging, that is MRI machines, they rely on a continuous closed loop system of liquid helium. What does it do? MRI uses heavy magnets. So to cool down those superconducting magnets and to maintain the electrical field that is required for these internal diagnostic machines, that is magnetic resonance imaging and all these machines, helium is used again. So most of the tasks we see of helium is as a coolant, as a high pressure gas, as something that is very stable and inert. All of these characteristics make helium very critical as a very strategic resource. Okay. What are the key challenges and vulnerabilities associated with helium? What are the challenges? First of all is severe technical transport bottlenecks. Transport is very difficult. Helium can only be stored and moved in specialized heavy vacuum jacketed stainless steel cryogenic vessels. We see the term cryogenic. Cryogenic is basically related to cooling because we need it as liquid. So steel cryogenic vessels which are heavily vacuumed and they are also heavily jacketed. In these, helium is moved and helium is stored. And then the ISO containers, the International Organization for Standard Containers, these has given the standard for these containers. And these ISO containers, these heavily jacketed containers, are manufactured only by a very few global firms. So the transportation and the storage becomes very complicated. Then there is a high risk of spontaneous evaporation. That is, the boiling point is very low, so it can convert to gas at any moment. So liquid helium has a very small holding time as liquid, after which it starts boiling off. And it starts boiling off into the atmosphere, and it is so light that it escapes the Earth's gravity entirely. It escapes beyond the atmosphere of the Earth. So holding time of liquid helium is very low. It has to be held off, or else once it evaporates, it will escape the gravitational field and escape the atmosphere of the Earth, and it will be gone. And also, it is a very limited resource. We all know that. Extreme geopolitical supply concentration. Again, this is very, very, very important. Okay. US 43%, Qatar 33%. Again, so the global output of helium is concentrated heavily among just a few countries. First is US with the maximum concentration of it, that is 43%, and the second is Qatar, that is 33%. So these two countries together, they control the entire supply of the world's helium. Okay, this is more than 75% of the world's helium. If you add it, you'll get 76. All of this, three-fourths of world's helium is actually, the supply is controlled by USA and Qatar, just two countries. So the geopolitical supply concentration is very extreme when it comes to helium. Next, we talk about high vulnerability to geopolitical choke points. When it is actually concentrated in countries like this, these countries might have some geopolitical choke points, like the Strait of Hormuz near Qatar. So this creates a very vulnerable situation. Every time there's a disturbance near this Middle East or the Strait of Hormuz, the whole global access to helium is cut off. That is why this becomes a very important challenge in access to helium. Then we have major industrial applications of helium. First is silicon wafer manufacturing. Helium is clean, helium is stable and inert, we know this. So using helium provides this kind of clean, stable and inert environment, and this environment is very important for high purity optical fibers. And this is for silicon cooling during the fabrication of these chips. Then we talk about deep space rocketry. It purges the fuel lines, keeps it very clean and inert. It also seals critical valves in liquid propellant rocket stages during countdowns and active flight profiles. Okay, it is used in space rocketry. Then aerostat and tourism lifting systems. What do we mean by that? It serves as a safe, non-flammable alternative to hydrogen for filling weather tracking balloons and commercial airships. So when we use commercial airships, we use gases to keep them afloat. So instead of using hydrogen, which is actually very flammable and very unsafe, we want to use helium, and using helium keeps it safe and non-flammable. There cannot be fire because of helium. So hence they are used in aerostat and tourism lifting systems. Next is the industrial precision leak detection. Next is the industrial precision leak detection. When we talk about the industrial precision leak detection, we say that helium is injected into high pressure pipelines like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning networks and vacuum systems. And these can locate the cracks and the leaks that the larger molecules cannot pass through, but the smaller molecules can. And helium helps in detecting this kind of leak very precisely in the industrial system. Then advanced arc welding shielding. This is used as a protective shield gas in gas tungsten arc welding to prevent atmospheric contamination when welding specialized metals like aluminum and titanium. So now we understand that it is very critical, and then it can also create a huge vacuum in the supply of the global tech. And then the conflicts in the West Asia has threatened to disrupt the Qatari shipments and the US shipments, and hence India must also, like China, uh, have indigenous recovery networks, and domestic natural gas fields should be explored. And then it should insulate our manufacturing sectors and industrial and technology sectors from the shocks in global supply, like this one that China is protecting itself from. Now let us look at the new news. The next news is about a holiday turning into heartbreak, the Vietnam boat tragedy. Now, this is only important for your mains enrichment. For your mains exam, you can use this as an anecdotal case study or something. So, what is happening is that a group of Indian tourists, they left their home in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra Pradesh. From southern states, they left their home from there. Okay, and they went for a holiday in Vietnam. So on Friday, they were happy. They were cheerfully playing. They were updating their photographs and they were updating their videos. They were calling their parents home, calling the people home. They were buying souvenirs. But then there's this island called the Phuket Island. In the Phuket Island, their boat was capsized. Their boat was capsized. Okay, and they died. And then, of course, these people did not return home. Their families were waiting. And there was this one tourist which sadly told his son that Okay, now we're going out of network area and we're heading to an island, this Phuket Island. But they didn't know this was the last conversation between that father and the son duo. So these homes that were waiting for them are now receiving their coffins. This is what the tragedy is about. So this tragedy, what it reminds us that life is very uncertain, and then there are moments that cannot be controlled. And then for your mains enrichment, this points towards tourist safety standards. This is one thing. Stronger tourist safety standards, responsibility of travel operators, and the emergency response teams should be effective. These three things: tourist safety, travel tour operators' responsibility, and then emergency operations. Emergency response should be effective and prompt. So this actually helps. Now about this Long March 10B rocket, this is an advanced next generation medium to heavy lift launch vehicle, and it has a reusable first stage booster. It serves as a core pillar of China's modern space infrastructure. It has been engineered to lower the cost of access to space by how? By vertical descent, and it has specialized maritime retrieval, and it is reusable. That is important about it. So this rocket was research developed and launched under the state-owned China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. First of all, this becomes important. Then we have objective of the Long March 10B program is to eliminate the economic barriers of traditional single-use rocket launches because this is reusable. The robust LEO capacity. It is designed to carry payloads of up to 16 metric tons into the low Earth orbital. 16 metric tons it can carry, but in the low Earth orbital. Aerodynamic re-entry control. After separation, these nitrogen thrusters, they flip the booster and the grid fins can guide and stabilize it during atmospheric descent. So during the atmospheric descent, when it is going down, these wings keep it stable, and these nitrogen thrusters flip the booster. Propulsive braking. Real-time engine throttling generates counter thrust, slowing the descending booster for a controlled hover above the recovery platform. While coming down, this aerodynamic re-entry is very controlled and it is stable. And while it's landing, just before landing, it starts hovering above the recovery platform. So they have throttling generators. And this propulsive braking, it brakes right before it lands. Then net capture maritime system. So instead of landing legs, it does not have legs, it has specialized hooks, and this hook can catch the suspended wire, and then it can mount itself on the net of the wire and on an automated sea vessel. Okay, this is how it is recovered. Automated stabilization clamps. After capture, safety cables and locking mechanisms secure the booster against the swinging, protecting it from rough maritime conditions. Not only has it landed now, even being transported through this maritime field, It is very stable. Okay, it has safety clamps. So it has safety cables, safety clamps, it has hooks instead of landing legs, it has propulsive braking to hover just above the recovery platform, it has nitrogen thrusters for better aerodynamic re-entry control, and it has robust LEO capacity. That is, means it can go into the lower orbital with a payload of 16 metric tons. And how is it significant? This supports China's heavy lunar launch system and strengthens the goal of landing astronauts on Moon by 2030. China aims to land astronauts on Moon by 2030. Then reusable rockets can sharply lower launch cost. It will lower the launch cost because it is reusable, and it will help China deploy large satellite constellations and compete with Western broadband networks. Let us study about this scheme. The Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprise, that is PMFME scheme. Okay, so this scheme is about what? The Union Minister of Food Processing Industries, he presided over a specialized ceremony. The ceremony was held in New Delhi, and it celebrated what? Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprises. This is what is celebrated. Now, what becomes important? What is it celebrating in this scheme? The fact that it has crossed a milestone of 2 lakh credit linked beneficiaries. What is the milestone? 2 lakh credit linked beneficiaries. Okay, let us study more about the scheme, about this PMFME scheme. Okay, what is this scheme? It is a comprehensive, all inclusive, centrally sponsored program. It is a what kind of program? A centrally sponsored program, a national program, and it is very comprehensive and all inclusive. Why has it been designed? To formalize, upgrade, and scale up the heavy, unorganized micro food processing sector in India. The food processing center, the micro food processing center, is largely unorganized, and it has been launched. This scheme has been launched so that it can scale up this unorganized sector, formalize and upgrade this unorganized sector. Now, this scheme acts as a primary operational buffer, moving small-scale local food operators into a formal banking and regulatory economy by providing them with credit-linked capital subsidies, shared machinery platforms, and professional branding packages. So these manufacturers, local food operators that do not have standard packaging, do not have machinery, do not have proper credit lines, these are linked to the banking and regulatory economy through this scheme. This links, okay, and this links how? Through shared machinery platforms, through professional branding packages, through credit linked capital subsidies. Okay, so credit line is established. The key features are 35% credit linked capital subsidy. So the micro food processing units will receive 35% subsidy. 35% subsidy, and it is capped at rupees 10 lakh. Why will this subsidy be given? This will be given for upgrading the machinery, for upgrading the technology, and for their packaging facilities, as we discussed. One district, one product strategy. So each district will focus on a signature food product, and it will achieve the economies of scale in procurement, processing, branding, and marketing. So each district products on all these processes, that is procurement, processing, branding, and marketing, of just one product at a time. This will make it very organized. Then group infrastructure grants. The FPOs, farmer producer organizations, cooperatives, SHGs, self-help groups, all of these will receive 35% grants. 35% grant up to 3 crore, capped at 3 crore, for sharing what? Processing, storage, testing, and packaging facilities amongst themselves. Then grassroots seed capital. So each eligible self-help group member, every individual member, this is not about the group, this is about member, they will receive 40,000 as seed capital for working capital and purchasing small food processing equipment. Seed capital is what? The capital that is used to establish the foundation of everything. Branding and marketing support. The FPOs and cooperators will receive 50% financial assistance for packaging, branding, digital presence, and access to organized retail markets. Okay, these are a few things. And lastly, about the district resource persons. So there will be people, district resource person, and they will help these rural entrepreneurs with application, with the project reports, with registrations, with documentation, with access to bank loans. All of these processes will be helped through the district resource persons. This is a very important thing. It has district resource persons for helping out these rural entrepreneurs who know nothing about these applications, these processes, and who have less accessibility to these things. Okay, Now about the financial sharing pattern. The F is missing here, guys. This should have been financial sharing pattern. Okay. About the financial sharing pattern, so the general states and UTs with legislature will share it at a cost of 60% for central and 40% for state. For the northeastern and Himalayan states, the funding will follow 90% for central and 10% for state ratio. And for the UTs without legislatures, the UTs that are direct under the center, the central government will provide their funding for 100% of it. What is the significance of this scheme? The significance is that the scheme helps the informal food processors, or the rural entrepreneurs related to micro food processing. They will help access bank credit, GST, FSSAI, and Udyam registrations. They will reduce the dependence on informal lenders too. Okay, these informal bloodsucker money lenders, they will not be able to exploit them after this scheme. Then, with women, they form a major share of the beneficiaries and trainees. The scheme will strengthen the entrepreneurship, incomes, and the economic empowerment at the grassroots of women. Okay, and I think this was it for today's news. I, Manvi Shrestha, will take your leave today and we'll meet again tomorrow covering new current affairs. Thank you.